Hey everyone, welcome to Group Text. With me today is Judge Rachel Juarez, who is one of the three esteemed judges on the Emmy-nominated show Hot Bench, which was created by none other than my mother's friend, Judge Judy. This is incredible to believe. The show is now in its 11th season and is the #1 syndicated court program in original production. Judge Juarez is a graduate of Yale University as well as Stanford Law School and made her name as a litigator before being appointed to serve as a temporary judge in the LA County Superior Court Temporary Judge Program, which you're going to have to explain to us. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So excited to have you because everyone knows I'm the full-on Law and Order junkie. Okay, but first, What the hell is a temporary judge?
In Los Angeles, no, it's a good question. In Los Angeles County, they have a program where you can go through a long certification process and become a temporary judge who sits on assignment just for a few days a year. In my case, in traffic court, but you can do it in traffic court and family court. And I have to tell you, learning all of the traffic laws in Los Angeles, not that I didn't already know them, but boy, that was an undertaking, let me tell you.
Now, are you in regular traffic court or juvenile traffic court?
No, it was regular, but I'm not even sitting anymore now that I'm doing hot bench. So
right. You know. Yeah, I spent some time in juvenile traffic court. That's why I'm asking. So what is the difference? And now you get to see it from so many points of view, especially as a litigator. Do you look at how people argue a case now differently? And have you sort of put that in your own sort of work going forward?
Yes, absolutely. I don't think I really fully appreciated before sitting on the bench that what we as lawyers feel is important isn't necessarily important to the judge, right? All judges, when they read things, are going to identify specific points, specific lines of questioning that really resonate with them and really feel critical to them. And as a lawyer, it's kind of hard to narrow in on what the judge is going to care about. And so letting the judge talk more as a lawyer has really helped me as a lawyer, I think, to be a better advocate, because I used to talk more about what I thought was important because I felt I was persuasive. But now on the other side, when someone gives me an opportunity to kind of explore what I feel is important, that's what helps me decide a case.
Which is fascinating because you were a top flight litigator.
Sure.
And, it's like anything, when you see it from the other side, it's very often, Stanford Law, it's not like, you went to law, online degree. It's very interesting that it took kind of that perspective to understand fully your profession.
Absolutely. And to talk less, because you kind of think as a lawyer, you're advocating, you're putting on your case, you want to master your argument. As a judge, the opportunity to talk more really helps you kind of develop your opinions better, and it helps you get the information you need out of lawyers. And I didn't really fully appreciate that until being on the other side.
Okay, how did Hot Bench come about? And by the way, for people who don't know, Judy is one of the smartest human beings on every level.
Without a doubt.
On every level, including how she negotiates, what she decides to do, how she decides to do it. She's
incredible. She's the GOAT. She always will be. There's nobody that's ever going to do what she does. There's no one that's ever going to be like her.
No.
She's one of a kind.
Yes. So how did Hot Bench come about and how did you end up on it?
So I was practicing law. I was I still am a family law litigator in Los Angeles. I was actually home on bed rest. I had my third child 4 weeks earlier. Oof. When I got a call from a number I didn't recognize, a producer's name I didn't recognize, saying someone suggested you might want to be a TV judge. And it's not a joke to say I really thought he was kidding. I really thought this was somebody trolling me. It was a friend calling. But it turned out that one of my clients knew the executive producer of the show. And when they said they were looking for new judges, he said, I think my divorce lawyer would be a great judge. And it turned out we knew a lot of the same people, and it just kind of was shared, it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
And from there we did chemistry tests, and it all kind of happened in a matter of a few weeks.
How do you prepare differently for being a TV judge than, let's say, or when you're on judge duty or actually litigating a case?
Sure. So I think as a judge on TV, it is more our responsibility than a judge in real life to make sure the story and the background comes out in a logical and digestible way. We read papers beforehand. We know the background, just like a judge does in real court. But a judge in real court doesn't have a responsibility to make sure that the folks out there, sitting in the gallery or even in a jury, understand that these two met 2 years ago. They were dating, now they're not. We do have that responsibility. And so it's kind of our job to create a narrative, not a false one. It's all true. All real litigants, their stories are true. They have real cases, but to make sure that it comes out in a way that is understandable instead of just jumping in and saying, okay, why did you get these repairs done to your car? And start the story in a way where viewers would be totally lost from the beginning.
What was your major at Yale?
English.
Well, I was going to say, because obviously now you're going back and leaning on your liberal arts degree
Absolutely.
to become a storyteller again.
It is. And what's so funny? That is what attracted me to the law.
Really?
Yes, it was to be a trial advocate, and it was to tell stories. I mean, that was what that's why I became a lawyer. It's why I really wanted to go into law, was to be a trial lawyer, to tell persuasive stories, and to try to convince juries and judges of things. So it's kind of really full circle in a way.
Let's just get into the trials that were on the top of. Okay. So first of all, let's just jump right in with this United Healthcare CEO. I mean, you can't get away from it. So by the way, and I'm a Penn grad. So it's been another awesome year for us.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah, God, awesome year.
It has been so good. The last 2 years have been just fantastic. So yeah, we're real happy about that.
Right.
Obviously going to be an incredibly high profile case.
Oh yeah.
And we have a lot of high profile cases to talk about, but going into it, how do you get this guy a fair trial? I mean, and again, all of these big trials, how do you get them a fair trial where the juries don't have preconceived notions? And this is a perfect one because it is on tape.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is hard, right? It is really hard to find a jury, particularly in this case, no matter where you move it. I mean, the first obvious answer is you maybe move the trial out of, where it ends up in New York, because there may be less exposure in other places that aren't in the middle of Manhattan. But even moving it to a different county in New York won't probably get you a jury that doesn't know what's happened. It's really about the voir dire process and the jury questioning process on the judge and the lawyer. Not to find people that haven't heard about it, but to find people who have not been so saturated with media that they don't come in with somewhat of an open mind. And, that's hard to do. But it's really the best you can do, in these kind of circumstances.
How do you decide if cameras are going to be let into a courtroom? How do you decide if cameras are going to be let into a courtroom? I mean, who makes the final decision? Is there pressure from both sides, I assume? I mean, how do you finally say, okay, this is important for the public to see?
Yeah. Well, we welcome cameras at Hot Bench.
Yes.
But as a sitting judge, there are some jurisdictions where there are rules. There are some states, some counties where there's a rule from the legislature or from the rules board that there cannot be cameras in courtrooms. So sometimes that decision is just made up for a specific jurisdiction. Otherwise, it is up to the judge and their discretion. And I think it does come down to whether or not the judge feels like it's going to compromise the integrity of the proceeding. And typically, you kind of assume that it won't compromise the actual integrity of the proceeding, because it's being broadcast isn't really going to have feedback into the courtroom. But to assume that it won't have any impact is kind of naive. So I think it's balancing, fairness to the participants, but also especially today, especially with former president and, President-elect Trump. There's an importance, I think, for people to see the legal system, to have confidence in it, to understand that it is not a sham behind closed doors, as some people may claim it is. And so you really kind of have to balance the good to the public with the fairness to litigants.
I was going to say, do the participants get to have a say in it?
Certainly. Yeah, their motions will be filed from both sides. And I'm sure the judge takes that into account whether or not, if both sides wanted it publicized, that would certainly be an easier decision to make. If both sides didn't, it would also be a little bit easier to deny it, but it's ultimately up to the judge.
I mean, again, this guy, they have pictures of him smiling.
Right.
So, okay, we can't get away from the Menendez brothers.
No.
So much to discuss. Okay, it's happened 35 years ago. It's never really gone away. There was a renewed push on social media for the brothers to get parole. There's been 2 very high profile projects, the Ryan Murphy one and the documentary. Why did this suddenly catch fire again?
I mean, obviously it's the publicity. I can't tell you for the life of me. I've been trying to figure that out too. What really renewed interest for the projects to come up, 5 or 6 years ago, as opposed to 10 years ago. The appeals, the actual appeals were exhausted over 20 years ago.
Really?
So, yes, there are procedures that they're going through right now, obviously, clemency, resentencing, which have not been exhausted. But the actual appellate process was exhausted decades ago. So I'm not sure why Ryan Murphy and why it picked up such steam when it did.
But you just brought up a great point. They were through the appellate process. Why suddenly now? Is it that they found this new evidence?
Yes, I think it is. And I think you can't ignore public pressure. I mean, the people that are deciding, especially the Los Angeles district attorney and perhaps the governor at some point, they're elected positions. And I think it would be naive not to assume that a lot of it is political pressure by people that are in office and that plan to run for office.
So, but you just brought up a great point with people who don't live in Los Angeles. No, we are having a full change of district attorneys. And
a big one.
A big one from to this new man named Nathan Hochman, because people hated our district attorney.
Yes.
Literally, it was insane. Yeah. And I'm not going to, say his name or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And the first question the incoming DA was asked, what are you going to do about the new Menendez interviews?
Right. And it's going to be fascinating to see because, our former district attorney, the one that's coming out, was kind of ushered in on a sort of, I won't say soft on crime, but more liberal, progressive, less punishment, fewer prosecutions. And people ended up hating it. Right. And so Nathan Hochman has come in with a tough on crime stance. I'm going to clean up crime. I'm going to be harsher. So the first thing that he's faced with is kind of, if you look at it a certain way, am I going to be soft or hard on the Menendez brothers?
Right.
And even though I think the greater Los Angeles has been kind of craving a tougher on crime stance, I think the atmosphere with the Menendez brothers I think the public is in favor of seeing them go free.
Here's my big question with that, though, okay, we can break is wrong word. We can give them some grace on the father. You still killed mom. And not only killed her, you went out and reloaded and came back in. Yeah. So why don't people see that difference? I mean, to me, that alone should not allow them parole. You went out and reloaded. Dad, we get how, at the time, men especially didn't understand that boys could be molested. It was a very different time in our way of thinking about these kinds of cases. How do you give them parole on mom? They went out and reloaded.
It's tough. I think the issue really, the way that you can get there is not because where the argument is that this was a crime of passion in the heat of the moment. They were really battered victims in the sense that, you have the same battered spouse stuff going on now where women who plan, or men who plan to kill their abusers are shown more grace in the sentencing process. Even though it wasn't a crime of passion, it was something that arose out of many years of abuse. And I think that's the way to get there if you're going to get there. It's to say that they believed or knew that their mother knew what was happening, didn't protect them, and that the abuse that drove them to hurt their father is the same abuse that drove them to kill their mother as well. And it's also the fact that nobody is saying that we're going to send them away and give them a party and you can't undo 30 plus years in jail. It's not that they're going to be excused for what they've done. It's that the sentence they have served, which is over 30 years in jail, at this point has been sufficient. So nobody's going to say we give you a pass on the murders. It's just we're going to resentence you and change the punishment a little.
And they've had denied parole in the past. So, which brings me to Susan Smith. So people who don't remember Susan Smith, she killed her 2 young sons, then made up a story that they had been kidnapped by a carjacker. And originally her husband stood by her. And then he was like, no, do you believe she has been rehabilitated? No. Why not?
Yeah, I don't think any legal experts were surprised to see that she was denied parole. Especially, it's a perfect contrast to the Menendez brothers, right? The Menendez brothers have had clean records for decades. They've been creating programs, doing good work in prison. Should that be enough to let them out? That's a different decision. But Susan Smith has a laundry list of problems in prison, a laundry list. And although she was okay for a few years before parole, immediately before she came up for parole, she had this issue where she was interviewed by a reporter and she was giving out the names of victims, of witnesses, and contact information to talk to. So, and that's strictly forbidden. You're not allowed to do that. As a criminal, you're interviewed, you're convicted, you cannot give the contact information of your victims out to people when you're being interviewed or for any other purpose. So this woman is somebody who just she hasn't shown that she's really learned her lesson and become a model citizen who might be ready to rejoin society. She's still breaking the rules in jail and has been for years.
Because her husband came up and 14 witnesses opposed her release.
And that's another really important thing and another important contrast to the Menendez brothers. They're both families. Right? The Menendez brothers' families are advocating for their release, despite the fact that they were also related to the victims. And that says a lot because these are the victims' legacy who want to see these men out of jail. Susan Smith's family, who is also related to her victims, don't want her ever to see the light of day. And because that's kind of the voice of the victims that's coming out, that matters a lot to a parole board.
All of these are famous people who became famous because of their crimes. Then, of course, what are we most interested in but celebrity crimes? Right. So we have Sean Combs. We have Harvey Weinstein back in the news. And out of nowhere came Garth Brooks.
Right.
That, to me, is the most complicated because someone came out and alleged that he, sexually assaulted them. And then he came out and said it never happened. And that she's trying to shake him down. And they, meaning Garth Brooks, filed before she filed. Can you just untangle this particular one for me?
Yes, it's a procedural morass. There's no doubt. And so far you got it, right? Is she came out publicly and accused him without filing a lawsuit yet.
Okay, so that's key.
Correct.
She had not filed anything.
She had not filed the lawsuit at that point.
What does that tell you?
Not a lot necessarily, because there's a lot going on behind the scenes. It doesn't tell me a lot in terms of whether or not these allegations are true.
Okay.
Because once you bring them to the public, this wasn't a private shakedown that she hoped nobody else would find out about. They came to the public. They were going to be vetted in some way. So it doesn't tell me a lot about the veracity. It tells me a little bit about their strategy.
Yeah.
Because what happened was they gave Garth Brooks an opportunity to go file a case himself. And he did so in Mississippi. And he did so in federal court. So what he did was he got the first filed case out there where he alleged that she was extorting him, that she was defaming him, and all sorts of Mississippi state crimes. And then she filed in California. She came to California. And when Garth Brooks filed, he filed anonymously. He filed as a John Doe. She immediately came into California and outed him to make very clear that these two things were related.
So why can you file him in Mississippi, her in California? How does that connect? Does that mean they both have to fight twice?
So that's what Garth Brooks is saying shouldn't happen. And that is why he filed in Mississippi, in anticipation of her filing. She went and filed in California State Court, all of the same claims. There are a lot of reasons Garth Brooks would rather be in federal court in Mississippi.
Why?
Than in California. The clearest one to me is that if Garth Brooks had filed preemptively in California, California has a lot of statutes called anti-SLAPP, where if you file a lawsuit that does not have a good basis and is just to silence someone, you can get in huge trouble. You can end up paying a bunch of attorney's fees, a bunch of sanctions. Mississippi doesn't have anti-SLAPP suits. So I think what he did was he wanted to be in federal court, where the general idea is that federal court judges are more willing to dismiss claims, juries can be more diverse, not just pull from the immediate county, but from rural counties, which some people believe would be helpful to Garth Brooks to have a more diverse jury pool. And it's harder to pursue a claim in federal court than it is in California state court.
So I always came to understand that the crime, you had to file where the crime was committed.
Yeah, where the actions were committed, because this is civil.
Right, where the actions were committed.
Right.
So she's saying this happened in California, so we're going to go through the state. And he's saying this happened in Mississippi, so that's why I'm filing in Mississippi. I mean, is that sort of an admission of guilt in a strange way?
No, because he's not saying that. So his lawsuit is not that I committed these assaults. It's that she's extorting me and defaming me. And those are happening in Mississippi. She called me in Mississippi to extort me. She, defamed me in publications that ran in Mississippi. So, and in terms of federal court, the reason they're able to be in federal court is because they're from different states. And so they have what's called diversity jurisdiction.
It's so confusing.
It is. And so just to make it more confusing, what she has now done, what's now happening in California is Garth Brooks had the case moved already. This is done from California state court to California federal court.
Okay, so that's a win for him.
That is a win for him because at a minimum, he's now in federal court. So even if it ends up in California, you don't need a unanimous jury anymore on a civil claim.
Really?
Yes.
You have to have a majority.
So federal court requires a unanimous jury. The California state court they all have different requirements, right? So what you're looking at now is it's faster to get to court. It is easier to dismiss a claim. You're going to have judges that consider it more at the motion to dismiss phase. You have all these sort of different things that are happening that make it procedurally better for him to get out of state court. And then you have separately that he wants to get to federal court in Mississippi. So now he's asking, So now he's asking for the federal court to consolidate the two actions in Mississippi and have them heard together, because he doesn't want to have to litigate everything twice.
Wow, are his lawyers making money? That's all I'm going to say. That is a lot of billable hours.
It is a lot of billable hours, but it's really brilliant legal maneuvering.
Right.
And, her lawyers are trying to point that out. This is brilliant legal maneuvering, but I don't think he denies that. He's not doing anything wrong. He's using the legal system the way that it's intended to be used. So it's really brilliant what they've done, I think.
So let's go to fascinating and high profile, and who is someone who is sabotaging their own defense, P. Diddy. Yeah. So first of all, let me just make sure I have this straight.
Yeah.
So we know what the accusations are. When he thought they were coming down on him, he left the country. Yeah. Then he decided to come back. Then he was arrested. And then now he has constantly gotten in trouble in jail. He's still being held in the city and has complained about the food and the accommodations. And then the reason they held him without bail was because they were worried he was going to try and influence people. And then they found a list hidden in his jail cell with the names of people he thought he could pressure.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with that, because he's clearly arguing that is an attorney-client privileged list.
But it's what it has to explain to me. It's attorney-client privilege when you discuss it with your attorney.
Correct.
But maybe for someone so smart, you shouldn't be making, note to self.
You shouldn't be keeping a note to self in your cell. No, you should not. And your lawyer should be making sure that you don't keep notes to self in your cell.
Right.
Yeah, no, he's intimidating witnesses. He has been this whole time. And I think, or that's at least the allegation, he could not be getting himself in more trouble. And then, to go from that to complaining about the food when there are countless people who are not him eating the food there, and doing just fine, it is ridiculous. The claim of inhumane conditions, because it's P. Diddy, everybody else is not claiming inhumane conditions. The conditions are very poor.
And if they are, nobody
Yeah.
cares.
Right. It's jail. I mean, that's everybody suffering through, holding cells and things like that. And there's nothing more humane about them because you're used to a higher standard of living.
So how is this going to play out, do you think? I mean, I know that's a huge question.
That's a huge question.
But his lawyer obviously cannot control him.
Right. Or he's found a lawyer that, is not doing enough to control him. Right.
Right.
One way or another, he's not being controlled. Yeah.
So how is this going to play out? Because obviously, again, this is one would take us back to cameras in the courtroom.
I don't think you're going to get cameras in the courtroom on this one, but I can't tell you for sure.
Why is your gut saying you won't?
So it's going to be less common to have them in a federal courtroom. I don't know the specific rules in the Southern District of New York. I don't think we're going to get cameras in that courtroom, mostly because of the nature of the allegations. And a lot of the women that may end up being part of this in larger indictment, because they're going to add them, there are going to be anonymity issues. And so I really can't see cameras in a courtroom where you're going to have big concerns about the victims' identities. There's no doubt that he will know the identities at some point, but there's a good chance that some of the identities may not be, splashed across the public docket. And because of the highly sensitive nature of a lot of these things, I don't think they're going to force these victims, even if they end up forcing them to make their identities public, which very well may happen. I don't think they're going to force them to testify on camera. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yet people's names still get out.
Of course. Yes.
How does that happen? I mean, I know all the tricks that they use in LA is there's always someone on the inside, and they use it in New York too when someone files. And I know all good divorce attorneys, that's where everyone's like, why are all these celebrities filing at the same time? It's like, because the good attorneys stack them.
Coordinate.
You coordinate.
That's what we do. Yeah.
And it's always on a Friday.
Yep.
Or
news cycles, dying.
Exactly. I mean, that's
filings on a Friday. You have a better chance of ducking under the radar for a while.
Which I didn't think about this till just now. When did lawyers get so media savvy? Was it a slow roll that followed sort of the media trends?
Yes. Yeah, I think yes. And it was with the advent of online dockets and online search capabilities, because it used to be that a runner would have to stand at the courthouse and wait for a filing, or pay someone in the courthouse, which they're not supposed to do, to alert them if a name comes in. Now that they have all of these kind of crawling websites that pull people's names, it's so much easier for this information to get out so quickly, and so much easier for people to kind of seize on things and not just find out something has happened, but to get the documents, because we have public legal systems. And so I think it's with the explosion, obviously, of online media, but also of the transition to the courts online.
That's very interesting, because there was always someone who would tip someone off, and there was a call, and it was just like when people were like, how do the paparazzi know when a celebrity is flying? I'm like, that's not hard,
Right. Yeah. They used to have people down at the courthouse waiting for filings to come in, looking at the names on filings, paying clerks to let them know. And now it still happens to a certain degree, but it's not really necessary anymore.
Right. So we were just talking, though, let's go back to Diddy.
Yeah.
All these celebrities, and this is very like Jeffrey Epstein 2.0. All these celebrities are getting sucked in. Yeah. How does that get handled? So now they're saying Jay-Z.
Right.
Does that now become
yesterday, right?
Yeah. So now does that become, now they have to investigate Jay-Z because of these allegations?
I presume somebody is investigating them, right? So the Jay-Z was brought into a civil claim.
Right.
So it's not criminal in and of itself.
But it sounds like it was criminal behavior.
Absolutely. If what is alleged in the civil case happened, it is without a doubt criminal behavior of the worst type.
Yeah.
So I would have to believe that somebody in the relevant jurisdiction is looking into this. Now that we know, because the civil case was originally filed with Jay-Z not identified, now that it's been refiled with him identified, I am sure there is somebody investigating this in the relevant criminal jurisdiction. And we'll see what happens. A lot of the civil claims against Diddy have not gone criminal yet. They may, but I don't think they all will. So it's anybody's guess what's going to happen.
And, again, all these celebrity names are
They're going to keep
getting,
coming.
yeah. Like I said, it's Epstein 2.0.
Yeah, it really is.
So how does a celebrity, I mean, you're LA, you were a high profile divorce attorney. How do you keep your client from getting named or brought into a mess like this? Especially because everyone's like, oh, everybody was always at these parties. They all knew. And like, no, he had this very famous July 4th party. And that's where a lot of these pictures were taken. They weren't at the parties, whatever they called them, with the baby oil. Right. I mean, that's what I'm saying is, how do you keep your client out of it?
You can't, and this is fascinating. Jay-Z is represented by my old law firm, and by a partner at my old law firm. You can't. There is a possibility sometimes that people bring the allegations to you in private. That's what happened with Jay-Z. They sent him a letter and said, "You're the guy, pay us millions of dollars," or something.
That's extortion.
There's a pretty good argument that it is, right?
Right.
But you can also argue that it's a settlement effort. It's an effort to settle a suit before it's filed, before you amend to include him as a suit. So it is possible, I suppose, to perhaps keep your client out by settling the case. Although in a case like this, that's not going to keep it quiet. There's just almost no hope of that. And so I think the better approach is once the snowball is rolling, you do what Jay-Z's attorneys did, and you come out aggressively and you put him out in front. I am sure that what he put together was coordinated with his lawyer, but it was done in his own voice, right? He's got a very smart lawyer, right? They put it in his own voice. They made him saying it, but it was done as part of a larger campaign to come out and hit these allegations head on, instead of letting them bring them forward and say, oh, now we've named Jay-Z. We're so sorry to do it, but he's guilty too.
Before I let you go, because I could talk to you forever. Yeah. Which is your favorite job?
Oh, hot bench, without a doubt.
Really?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really like it because it's really kind of, especially now, like we talked about earlier, it's bringing a little light into the kind of legal world that everybody's so fascinated with. And I really like the speediness. I like resolving these issues for somebody within an hour or two, and letting them move on. My cases as a divorce lawyer, they last years. Yeah. If I could get their divorces resolved, which you can, but in an hour, a totally different story. And I like the ability to kind of give some closure and let them move forward with their lives in a small amount of time. It feels like doing more good,
I have to ask you, on Hot Bench and these other legal shows, how do you not just look at someone? And Judge Judy does this, but she's sort of like got the right to do it. How do you not look at someone and go, are you stupid? It's like... it's like you when you have a teenager, and mine's not a teenager anymore, but I used to say to him, I go, how did you think this was going to end for you? I'm just curious.
And I will tell you, we ask questions like that sometimes. We have obviously the beauty of editing, right? We ask them, how did you think this was going to end sometimes? Look, Judy is her own beast, right? She kind of she says a lot of what we're thinking, right? She's earned the right to do that. She does her thing. We think that a lot.
And how do you not say it?
It's judicial temperament is all I can say. I can tell you, judges think that a lot in cases across the country, and some of them occasionally will say it. But that's part of being a judge, is you have litigants in front of you, particularly the ones that don't have lawyers, who are not part of the system, who are not being respectful enough. And you can put them in their place. You can, but it has to be a respectful process. Just like we're asking for respect from them, we have to give them respect back. So it's hard. It is hard to kind of keep it to enough, letting them know what you think without going overboard. That's been one of the hardest things for me, is to give enough of my mind without too much.
Favorite case that's already aired?
Easy. We had a man who was staying in we had a woman who was staying in the trailer of a friend because she was homeless. She decided to take it for a ride one day. Oops. Didn't have permission to do it. Crashed it within the first 5 minutes. And she came to court and sued him because and she destroyed her friend's trailer that he was giving her out of the kindness of his heart. Completely wrecked. She sued him because he had tempted her with a vehicle that was unfit for travel by not telling her, don't drive it around. And she lost some belongings when the thing crashed. She destroyed his home and she was suing him, and he didn't even countersue her. And she did not get it. All three of us gave her a different piece of our minds. How are you here? You would have been lucky for this never to come to court. You crashed his home. But she came, she was so outraged that he had kind of, falsely lulled her into driving this vehicle that was not fit for driving and ruined some of her clothes in the process.
I love that. So for more like that hot bench, visit you can't miss Hot Bench. Visit hot-bench.tv for local listings. Did I get that right? Hot-bench. Just go to hotbench.com.
I should know this.
Okay, guys, literally, it's written out as hot-bench-.-tv.
Let's see. I'll tell you.
Help me on this.
Yes, no, it's hotbench.tv. No
Okay.
doubt. So
Okay.
Hotbench.tv.
So do not miss Hot Bench Judge. Do not miss Hot Bench Judge Rachel Juarez. Go to hotbench.tv for local listings. Oh my God. I loved this.
We could do it for days. There's so much going on right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.